Stoic Life Principle 9. We suffer more in theory than in reality. As we discussed in Principle number 5, more than circumstances themselves, what affects us is our own interpretations about circumstances. In fact, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. In this principle we focus on developing this idea further. Stoic philosopher Epictetus pointed out that, nothing can truly impede us if we choose not to allow it to impede us. In that, he explained even if we are affected by a physical sickness, it should only be thought of as a disability of the body and not a disability of the mind, our will or our inner being. If we are able to develop this skill of not allowing external circumstances to define us or limit us, we can remain internally unaffected by external circumstances. For instance, Epictetus discussed the example of a man who is lame in his legs. He pointed out that, although that person may be impeded by that physical disability, he is not impeded in his will, mind or the inner being. So, he believed that nothing could impede a person unless that person allows it to impede him or her. When in 1921 at the age of 39, Franklin Delano Roosevelt showed symptoms of infantile paralysis that paralyzed him from his waist down. Many believed that it would be the end of his political career. At that time, disability was frowned upon and those who were disabled were not employed and were ostracized from society. But regardless of his disability, FDR went on to become the 32nd President of the United States, the longest-serving President of U.S. FDR gave leadership to U.S., not only during the Great Depression but also during the Second World War. As Epictetus pointed out, sickness may affect the body, but it is up to the individual to decide whether it is going to affect that person's willpower and inner being. What we choose to allow to affect our inner being is entirely up to us. This idea can be seen reflected in Mahatma Gandhi's thinking, when he said that, "I will not let anyone walk through my mind with their dirty feet." An in-depth exploration of this principle can be found in the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. In the Gita, Krishna, the advisor to the warrior Prince Arjuna, points out that although the body of a person can be affected by many things, the inner being of a person cannot be touched by external circumstances. Krishna explains to Arjuna that the inner being of a person cannot be cut into pieces by any weapon, cannot be burned by any fire, cannot be moistened by water or affected by any storm. Krishna then encourages Arjuna to not be mentally affected by what happens to the physical body and instead to carry out his duty, keeping his will and inner being intact. So, keep this principle in mind. Whenever something happens to you, say to yourself, "This thing cannot truly affect me, it can only affect something else." Remember, nothing can affect your will and your inner being, if you decide not to allow anything to affect your will and your inner being.